Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to really get into the history and functions of South Africa's National Intelligence Agency, the NIA.
That's right.
We know you, our listener, often want to get up to speed quickly but thoroughly on these, well, complex topics.
Absolutely. And this one certainly has its layers.
So we've gone through a pretty detailed document that lays out the NIA's origins, its mandate, how it's changed over time.
And our mission today, you could say, is to unpack all of that. We want to understand its place in South Africa's security setup, how it transformed, and maybe touch on some key moments.
Exactly. So let's dive right in. Origins. It kicked off January 1st, 1994.
A massive year for South Africa, wasn't it? The year of the first democratic, multiracial elections, a pivotal moment.
Truly. And it wasn't created out of thin air, was it? There was a predecessor?
Correct. It essentially grew out of the old National Intelligence Service, the NIS. The NIA took over the NIS's domestic intelligence role.
Okay, so domestic. What happened to the foreign intelligence side?
That went to a new separate body called the South African Secret Service, or SAS. Both the NIA and SAS were officially created by the Intelligence Act of 1994.
Right. So NIA looked inwards, SAS looked outwards. Makes sense.
Precisely. NIA focused squarely on internal security within South Africa's borders.
But you mentioned earlier it wasn't just the NIS splitting, it was a bigger merger, wasn't it?
No, absolutely. A much bigger deal. The NIA and SAS were actually formed by bringing together 6 different intelligence bodies from before 1994.
6. Wow. Okay, so obviously the NIS. Who else?
Well, you had the intelligence wings of the liberation movements,
Right.
the ANC's Department of Intelligence and Security, that's the DIS, and the PAIC's Pan-African Security Service, PAS.
Just a second, Passes.
And then you also had the intelligence services from the former so-called homelands, Venda, Transkei, and Bophuthatswana. They were all folded in.
That's quite the mix, bringing together groups that were, frankly, often on opposing sides before 94.
It really was a huge undertaking, and it gives you a sense of the scale. Initially, the combined NIA and SAS had around 4,000 personnel.
4,000. How did that break down? Where did most come from?
The biggest chunk, about 2,130, came from the old NIS.
Right.
The ANC's DIS brought in a significant number too, around 910.
Uh,
Then Bophuthatswana's service added 304, Transkei contributed 233, and Venda 76. The rest presumably came from PAS.
so quite a blend of experiences and backgrounds right from the start.
Exactly. It really highlights the effort to build something new and representative.
And reflecting that national scope, it wasn't just called the NIA in English, was it?
No, definitely not. It had official names in Afrikaans National Intelligence Agent SCAP, and also in Southern Ndebele, Xhosa, Zulu, Swazi, Northern Sotho, Swana, Sangha, and Venda.
That really underscores the national identity they were aiming for.
It does, right from day one.
Okay, so this diverse agency is formed. What was its actual job? What was the mandate?
The National Strategic Intelligence Act of '94 set out its core functions. Fundamentally, Job 1 was to identify threats existing or potential to the security of the country and its people.
Identifying threats, and then what?
A key part was feeding that intelligence upwards, specifically to the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee, NICC. Think of NIA as a primary info source for NICC.
Okay, so gathering and sharing intel with the coordinating body. What else?
They were also responsible for gathering departmental intelligence if another government department asked for it. And crucially, they held the national counterintelligence responsibility.
Counterintelligence. What does that entail, practically?
It meant both running their own counterintel ops and coordinating the national effort to, well, find and neutralize security threats, spies, sabotage, that sort of thing.
Sounds like they had to look both forwards and backwards, in a way. Preventative and reactive?
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. Proactively, they were meant to monitor the whole domestic scene, economic, social, political, environmental, to give early warnings about potential trouble for the constitutional order or public safety.
And reactively.
Reactively, if a threat or crisis did emerge, they'd monitor events to provide tactical intelligence to help investigations or prosecutions. But, and this is important without stepping on the toes of other departments, like the police.
Right. Avoid duplicating effort. Stay in their lane.
Precisely. There was also a more strategic long-term piece, too.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
A strategic projective assessment role, basically analyzing patterns and trends in the intelligence they gathered to provide strategic early warnings and also to help shape government policy.
So informing policy decisions, too.
Yes, and specifically, they had to keep the president informed about threats and provide relevant intel to the South African Police Service, the SAPS, for their investigations.
Okay, that gives it a good picture of the what. What about the how? How is the NIA structured internally?
Well, as you'd expect with intelligence agencies, the exact structure is mostly kept under wraps, confidential.
Sure, but any hints?
The source material we looked at does mention a few reported departments or sections. Things like counterintelligence, domestic collection, and security. Gives you a rough idea of the main operational divisions.
And size-wise, we heard about the initial 4,000 across NIA and SAS. Any later figures for just the NIA?
Yeah, there's a figure from 1999 suggesting the NIA itself employed around 1,500 people by then.
Okay, so maybe some consolidation or shifting personnel after the initial merger.
Possibly. Or just natural evolution over the first few years.
Now, names. Agency names can change and cause confusion. Can we clarify the NIA's name changes?
Right, this is important. Formed as the National Intelligence Agency, NIA, on January 1st, 1994. Now, the source we have mentions a name change to National Intelligence Service on January 1st, 1995.
Wait, back to NIS. That seems odd given it came from the NIS.
It does seem like a potential error in the source material, honestly. The key confirmed change came later. On October 2, 2005, it officially became the Domestic Branch State Security Agency.
Ah, okay. That makes more sense being folded into the bigger State Security Agency, or SSA.
Exactly. That reflects the later restructuring of the whole intelligence community.
Let's move into the timeline then, the history and the leaders. First up, Cizek Eli Sixash, the first Director General, 1995 to 99. What was his main task?
His biggest challenge, undoubtedly, was welding together those 6 incredibly diverse intelligence groups we talked about.
Yeah, that must have been immense. Different cultures, histories.
Huge, forging a single organizational identity. But his time was also marked by some, let's say, very challenging and controversial events, things that really highlight the tricky nature of this work.
Like what? What sort of events?
Well, one major incident was the death of the NIA's own chief of security, Muziwendoda Mdoli, in October 95. Found dead in his car, gunshot wound to the head.
Suicide.
Officially ruled as probable suicide, but the circumstances were suspicious enough that the pathologist at the inquest questioned it. There were even unconfirmed whispers he might have been digging into old apartheid-era stuff.
And the investigation.
The police investigation kind of stalled. So the NIA apparently launched its own internal probe, but this reportedly involved some controversial surveillance of senior police officials.
That wouldn't have gone down well.
No. It created serious friction between the NIA and the police right from the early days. Shows the difficulty of setting up clear boundaries and cooperation.
A really tough start. Any other major incidents under Sixash?
Yes, also in late 95, an alleged incident at Sixash's home claims he drew a pistol on his wife and family. The NIA flatly denied it, suggesting the police leaked it, which just worsened the tension.
More fiction.
Then in 97, during a move to a new HQ, they had a major security breach, vehicles, and computer equipment stolen. Perpetrators never found.
Not great for an intelligence agency.
Not ideal. And also around that time, January 97, the Deputy Minister, Joe Nolanla, tasked the NIA with looking into the status of files related to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC. Did personnel still have them? Had they been destroyed? It shows the agency grappling with the past.
So a period of massive change, internal consolidation, but also serious incidents in interagency tension. Okay, next came Vusi Mavembela, DG from October 99 to 2004. What defined his era?
Mavembela came from the ANC's DIS background. He'd been deputy DG already. He publicly aimed to boost discipline and accountability within the NIA.
Tighten things up internally.
Right, and Minister Nalanla at the time also stressed speeding up the transformation of the NIA staff, making it reflect the country's demographics better, race, gender, disability.
So internal reforms and representation were key themes. What about operational issues or controversies?
Oh, there were several. Late 99, the Democratic Alliance claimed their offices were bugged. The NIA strongly denied it.
Classic accusation.
Indeed. Then there was a really strange investigation into claims the NIA had been running a counterintelligence op against the German embassy since 95.
Against the German embassy. Why?
On suspicion, they were trying to recruit South African citizens. The alleged op involved surveillance from a nearby house, and supposedly a covert camera was even found in a bin near the embassy.
Wow, that's bold. Raises questions about diplomatic lines.
Absolutely. And then there were serious internal issues, too.
Such as?
In October '98, actually just before Movembela formally took over but setting the stage, two NIA members were caught trying to cash stolen share certificates worth a huge amount, $180 million.
180 million.
Seriously?
Yes, and they were linked to a brokerage allegedly involved in money laundering and a dodgy offshore loan scheme. Their NIA handler in Munich got suspended amid allegations of fraud, misusing state resources, even death threats.
That points to some serious potential for internal rot.
It definitely highlighted vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Other things under Movembela. The NIA vetted MPs for the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence and rejected the Democratic Party's nominee, which raised eyebrows about political influence. Early 2000, the leader of Pagad, the vigilante group, accused the NIA of being involved in bombings, targeting them. Police dismissed it.
And then, quite embarrassingly, the NIA and SAS got caught up in an international fraud case started by a former NIA member using old apartheid front companies. Led to a $14 million lawsuit against the government.
Ouch.
On a grim note, in September 2000, the NIA did provide intel about a planned Pagad assassination of a judicial official. Tragically, a Cape Town magistrate was killed later that month. Shows their intel capacity, but also its limits.
A mixed bag, then. Movembela eventually left for the private sector in late 2004.
That's right. His tenure saw reform efforts, but also a string of pretty high-profile controversies and security problems.
His successor, Billy Masutla, had a much shorter run, 2004 to 2005, and arguably even more controversy. What happened there?
Masutla's time was almost entirely overshadowed by allegations he'd ordered illegal surveillance on Saki Makuzoma, an ANC figure and businessman seen as potentially involved in ANC succession politics.
Targeting political figures, that's serious.
Very. It led to Masutla being suspended in October 2005. The Inspector General of Intelligence investigated and found the surveillance was indeed unlawful.
And consequences followed.
Yes. The NIA's head of operations at the time, Gibson Njang, resigned over it. It really pointed to the danger of intelligence agencies getting dragged into party politics.
Did Masutla accept the suspension?
Not quietly. He challenged it legally, arguing the minister couldn't suspend him. President Mbeki countered that it was due to a breakdown of trust. Masutla was ultimately dismissed.
Yeah.
He took it all the way to the Constitutional Court, which upheld the dismissal in 2007, citing that breakdown of trust, though he did get his benefits paid out. A real saga over oversight and who controls the agency.
And wasn't there more? Allegations beyond just the Makuzoma surveillance.
Yes, indeed. Masutla was also accused of being involved in a wider project involving intercepting communications of, well, a range of people. Senior ANC figures, opposition members, business people, civil servants.
A broad net.
And perhaps most explosively, he was accused of authorizing the creation of fake emails. Emails designed to sow division within the ANC during that succession battle. These fakes were allegedly even put into a report given to President Mbeki.
Fabricated intelligence. Wow. Was he convicted?
It's crucial to add, he was later acquitted in related criminal cases, specifically on charges related to the hoax emails and withholding information from the Inspector General. But the allegations themselves paint a picture of the potential for serious misuse of power.
A very turbulent period. After Masutla, Manala Manzini took the helm in March 2006, serving until 2009. What marked his tenure?
Manzini stepped in after all that instability. He'd previously headed the Technical Interception Division. He was involved in some diplomacy, like a delegation to Zimbabwe on political and economic issues. But, like his predecessors, his leadership wasn't without major controversy.
Okay, what kind of controversy this time?
Well, on a personal level, there were allegations of domestic violence made by his wife in 2007, which he later confirmed.
Right, and professionally.
More significantly, in 2008, Manzini and the NIA got deeply embroiled in efforts surrounding the prosecution of the National Police Commissioner, Jackie Saleeby, for corruption.
How were they involved?
Reports suggested they were involved in getting a key witness, Glenn Agliotti, to retract an affidavit against Saleeby. Agliotti later claimed he'd been pressured.
That sounds like potential obstruction of justice.
It raised very serious questions. Plus, investigations uncovered business dealings between Manzini and Agliotti's landlady, which looked like a clear conflict of interest. Involvement in such a high-profile corruption case really damaged perceptions of the agency's impartiality.
Definitely. Were there other major security issues during his time?
Yes, in May 2008, when xenophobic violence flared up, the NIA investigated whether there might be a political motive, a third force, trying to destabilize things ahead of the 2009 elections.
Uh-huh.
And Manzini himself was accused of blocking the release of a critical ministerial review of the intelligence services. That review apparently called for big reforms, including ending the NIA's very broad, kind of vague mandate for gathering domestic, political, and economic intelligence.
Suggesting some resistance to change or tighter oversight from within.
That was certainly the accusation, a desire to keep that broad mandate, perhaps.
Okay, Manzini's term ends in 2009. Then Lizzo Gibson Njenji returned. He'd resigned earlier under Masela, right? He becomes director in October 2009.
Yes, and this is when the NIA formally becomes a division within the new state security agency, the SSA. So Njenji heads the domestic branch, but his second run was also quite short, ending in 2011.
And controversial again.
It seems so. His departure in September 2011 was initially announced as a resignation, which he denied. Reports swirled about strained relations with President Zuma and the state security minister, Siabonga Quayle.
Why the strain?
The initial suggestions pointed to political intelligence gathering, again targeting senior ANC figures in another succession race. But later reports suggested something else.
What was that?
That the real reason for his, let's call it, forced resignation was an intelligence probe he'd initiated into the growing influence of the Gupta family, an investigation that Minister Tswail allegedly shut down.
Ah, the Gupta connection. That adds another layer of political intrigue.
Indeed, again, highlighting the potential for political interference in intelligence work.
After Njenje left in 2011, it seems there was a gap, right? No named director until 2013.
That's correct. Dennis Lakazani Dolmo served as the acting DG for the whole SSA during that period, but the specific domestic branch head position seems to have been vacant. Then, in August 2013, Simon Ntombela was appointed.
And his tenure, also brief.
Very brief. Ntombela had been acting head of the foreign branch before moving to domestic. But just over a year later, September 2014, both he and his deputy were suddenly redeployed to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation.
Redeployed. That sounds like a polite way of saying moved out.
It often is. The move raised concerns because experienced people were leaving, while some other officials facing corruption allegations were apparently kept on within the agency. Ntombela later became ambassador to Poland, suggests more internal turbulence.
It seems like a pattern. So since Ntombela, who else has led the domestic branch?
Becky W.J. Longa was appointed in 2015 after another gap. Then Bob Malonga took over in 2017, followed by Melody Samuef from 2019 to 2021.
And Musa's departure left it vacant again for a while.
Yes, the position remained vacant after he left. The ministers mentioned recently are Ayanda Dwadlo and Zizi Kodwa, with Melody Mufet named as the agency executive, which might refer to his role before departure or another capacity.
And headquarters still in Musanda, Pretoria.
That's right. And the parent body remains the State Security Agency. That shift from NIA to the domestic branch of the SSA is really the key structural change in its recent history.
It is. It reflects that ongoing effort to reorganize and perhaps better control the intelligence structures.
Or adapt them to new challenges, yes.
So let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive shows the NIA's journey has been, well, anything but simple. It started with this huge ambition, unifying all those disparate groups in '94.
A really foundational moment.
And it evolved into its current form as the domestic branch of the SSA, with this wide-ranging mandate to spot threats and react to them.
But as we've seen, that journey was packed with controversies, internal struggles, accusations of corruption, questions about political influence.
Absolutely. It really throws a spotlight on how tricky intelligence work is in a democracy, doesn't it? That constant push and pull between needing security and needing oversight.
Exactly. The history is full of examples of that tension.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. When you look at this whole history, the transformations, the repeated controversies, the leadership churn, what does it suggest about where intelligence gathering and national security are headed in South Africa today?
And maybe more importantly, how do these past events, these specific instances of alleged overreach or political interference, shape how we should think about that crucial balance between security and accountability now?
It's something worth mulling over.
Hmm.
We definitely encourage you to look deeper into the source material if this has sparked your interest.
Understanding this history, even with all its complexities and, frankly, murky episodes, gives you real insight into the challenges facing any democratic state trying to manage its intelligence services effectively and ethically.